What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? So unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of weeks, you've probably heard about the new game mode for Honkai Star Rail in simulated universe known as the Swarm Disaster. And what a disaster it is for free-to-play players. This game mode was designed to give a proving ground for all the whales and pay-to-win players so that they can flex on all the free-to-play players and make them all feel like a bunch of lousy good-for-nothings.
Kudu, you see how stupid you sound, Herda? Nobody likes you. This is why you're on the bottom of the tier list. What were you thinking when you made this game mode? You're so dumb. Kudu, you see how dumb you sound? Kudu, big ol' idiot.
Anyways, I wanted to talk about how Fu Xuan will be affecting the meta for Swarm Disaster, as well as how Dan Heng and Bibiter Lune is already affecting the meta for Swarm Disaster, why the developers have chosen to go this way with their new endgame content that we have all been very happy to receive and enjoy, and what this really means for the game, especially for free-to-play players. Because let's be honest with ourselves here, the developers have chosen this on purpose because the current meta for Swarm Disaster very heavily favors imaginary units as well as quantum units, and coincidentally in 1.3 when it's releasing we have an Bibiter Lune, which is an imaginary DPS, and Fu Xuan, who is a quantum tank, and we also have a quantum healer in the form of Lynx. So I thought we should go ahead and dive into Swarm Disaster, what it means for the game, and what these new units will be bringing to the table. So let's go ahead and dive in and stop wasting our time. Now, we have already seen a lot of value come out of Dan Heng and Bibiter Lune in this new game mode, not only because the enemies are imaginary weak, as well as quantum and lightning weak, but it's much deeper than that. With the new path of propagation that has been included into the new game mode, we also have found a lot of synergies that work really well with characters like Dan Heng and Bibiter Lune, as well as QQ, because this path literally directly synergizes with their kits. A lot of skill point usage, or skill point usage that specifically doesn't use actual skill points, this literally directly works with characters like QQ and Dan Heng and Bibiter Lune. And you can also farm these particular blessings in this game mode by specifically aiming for points on the map that you know are going to have enemies from the swarm on them, because they will give you propagation blessings after each single instance. But I wanted to talk about Fu Xuan. Fu Xuan provides something new and interesting to the game that wasn't provided by other characters in this way. Characters like Japard and March 7th are highly valuable in this game right now because at higher levels of Swarm Disaster, we simply need to run more than one sustain unit to be truly viable in those higher level game modes, because the enemies simply deal way too much damage. But one thing to remember about those shields is that those shields are technically capped at a certain amount. Fu Xuan has permanent damage mitigation for the entire team. She also has a skill that redirects most of the incoming damage to our team to her instead. And something to remember about this damage mitigation: it is not capped as far as we know right now. That means that the damage mitigation that she's able to provide has an infinite ceiling depending on how much damage the enemy is actually dealing us. If the enemy deals us more damage, she's going to end up mitigating more damage. She doesn't literally give a mitigation of a higher percent, but it is a set percentage based on what the enemy deals. So if the enemy deals us, let's say, 10,000 damage, she'll mitigate a certain amount of that 10,000 damage. But if the enemy deals us 100,000 damage, she will in the end mitigate the same percentage, but because the enemy damage is higher, she ends up mitigating far more damage than that 10,000 would have been. In fact, it's 10 times higher. She would literally mitigate 10 times more of the damage in that particular example that I'm giving you. The higher the amount of damage incoming from the enemy, technically, the more mitigation ends up coming through. So imagine running like preservation where you end up getting shields from your Path of Resonance and other effects, and Fu Xuan is on your team mitigating the damage, so even if they eat through your shields, some of the incoming damage will be mitigated from her permanently off her static, and if her skill is active, she'll mitigate even more and redirect it to herself. So I can't stress enough how powerful Fu Xuan will be in this game mode. She kind of like breaks the game mode a little bit. She kind of makes the amount of damage the enemies end up dealing a lot more manageable through her damage mitigation because, as I said, it's a percentage of the incoming damage rather than being held back, I guess you could say, by whatever stats we're able to provide our shields. She does a percentage of what the enemy does. So if you're getting hit by the boss, she simply mitigates a higher amount than she would if it's a normal enemy because it is a percentage of that amount. So again, I'm going to try to give a little TLDR for this, and you can try to put your input in the comments as well. It is always appreciated. I'm not perfect. I occasionally make mistakes and sometimes suck at explaining things, but Fu Xuan doesn't literally change the amount of damage that she mitigates. She mitigates the same percentage, but that value is going to differ based on how much damage comes from the enemy. So it's going to be a different number every single time because it's the percentage of damage incoming from the enemy. So we are more likely to survive high damage outputs from enemies in this game mode with Fu Xuan because those one-shot hits that come through from the enemy probably won't one-shot us anymore because so much of the damage ends up getting mitigated because it's not actually capped. And because this is a new game mode, a new simulated universe mode, we have not actually been able to build up the legacy buffs that we would normally have in simulated universe. These buffs that we have recently been able to acquire aren't unlocked yet. We have to unlock them over an amount of time, and some of them do end up generating a whole lot of value for us over time, such as preservation can give us up to 36% overall defense. Now, Fu Xuan doesn't necessarily care much about the defense, but the rest of our team would care about that defense, and with Fu Xuan's damage mitigation, as well as the extra defense on our characters, you can see how these synergies start to really add up once we have unlocked a lot of these legacy buffs from the new game mode. But as it currently stands, unless you've been grinding this new game mode a whole lot, you don't necessarily have these buffs, and you might not necessarily have the perfect builds in mind in order to be able to clear the content. So we are more incentivized to pull for characters like Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune, who's currently out right now, coincidentally when the event first comes out, and shortly after the event comes out we have Fu Xuan coming out. Two characters that are very, very powerful for the overall meta of the game, and their value is even more elevated in a game mode like Swarm Disaster. So the pressure is really on for a lot of players, especially free-to-play players, to pull for these characters such as Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune and Fu Xuan, or even Lynx that are coming out right now in conjunction with this new game mode, because they simply are really good characters for the game mode. But I want people to remember that once we build up a lot of buffs, once we find the right synergies, and once you find the right path that works for you to be able to clear the content, you're not necessarily going to need those characters or potentially even want those characters. It really just depends, right? Because these are great meta characters that are coming out right now, but I don't want you guys to necessarily pull if you don't actually want the characters themselves. You will eventually be able to clear the game modes given enough time, and don't forget that just like with Memory of Chaos, they might end up, we don't know right now, but they might end up changing the weakness type of the enemies eventually. And how silly will we think if there ends up being other characters in the future that actually synchronize better with the game mode and we don't necessarily want the characters. So I just wanted people to remember that and understand that the pressure to pull for Fu Xuan and Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune is by design. They want it to be this way. Despite giving us an amazing game mode and making one of the best gacha games that's ever been made ever, these guys know how to make money too, and they want to get paid for their hard work. and this is one way that they're able to do that. So if you like this video, maybe leave a like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. And if you hated this video, you hate me, you hate my guts, go ahead and leave a hate thread in the comments, and I'll tell you how much more Jingly You likes me than she likes you. Anyways, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out, and we will be going over Fu Xuan and links more in the future, and I wish you the best of luck on your 10 pulls. If I don't see you before then, she's only 10 days away. Let's go.